Hey, folks. So I'm going to talk about tests. And this is, I don't know if this is going to be the last one in this series, but it's certainly the last major one I think I saw. Maybe I'll think of some other stuff to do, but we're going to go with this one next for sure. This one took me a little longer. And it did that because I didn't like some of the math I was coming up with as I was making this. I was diving into some math, and I didn't really like part of what I was seeing. So I was going over it like three or four times, walking away from it from a day, looking at it again. I probably should have pinged one of my friends to kind of like double check my numbers or one of my sons. But yeah, in the end, I decided I'm going to make the video and I'm going to spell out the math that was bothering me, and maybe I'll find the error, and in which case I'll end up re-recording this, or I'm right and it will be what it is. So let's get to that part, and then we can talk about it. It's not a major point, but it bothers me. All right, so first things first, just a correction that was again pointed out to me. Um, I love that you guys correct me. That's perfect. Um, when you're learning a new system, I appreciate the feedback. But one thing I mentioned about surprise, there is a difference between surprise in 5e versus, draw steal, which was pointed out in the comments of the last video. That basically, when you're surprised, you can't take triggered actions or free actions. Ability or rolls against those folks have an edge. Those that are surprised. So yeah, I want to see how this plays, right? I kind of read over this because when I first read Surprise, it read a lot like 5e in that, you could try to sneak up on someone, and then if they, don't make the rolls, you successfully sneak, they don't sense you, you can get a surprise round, that kind of thing. And I totally missed that you still get your normal actions and you still get your maneuvers, you just don't get these different triggered actions. All I can guess is that maybe it was too. I would guess it was too overpowered to like have nobody take any actions even on a surprise round. Because if you think about it, if you're going to go with like the last video and what people always say about this, it's supposed to be a tactical game. Then if you don't get to move for a whole round, you can really get the leg up on your tactics, right? You could try and get the high ground, you can flank, you could do all that sexy stuff. But I guess I gotta see how it plays. Like, to me, if you get snuck up on, then I should have all that stuff, right? But yeah, just gotta see how it plays. All right, so tests. So there's some stuff in here that's going to be different, but it follows a lot of 5e flavor. A lot of the changes are just dealing with the fact that you're dealing with their 2d10 system versus the d20 system, but a lot of it is going to read very similar. So you have your usual test types, right? You have might, agility, reason, intuition, presence, right? So the major skills. Or major types, I should say. I don't want to use the word skills, it has a different connotation. You can get a +2 on your test if you can convince the DM that you have a skill that applies, right? So, let's say, I'm just going to pick a skill here real quick. Let's say you have the climb skill, right? And, if you have the climb skill, then you try to scale a wall or something. The DM would be saying, okay, you have to make it might be might or agility, depending how you want to slice it. But you could say to him, hey, I have the climb skill. I should be able to get a +2. If the DM says that's great, then you get a +2 added to your roll. Now, a couple things about this. One is, just FYI, which is interesting. When you look at the skills on page, whatever page I'm on, 255, right? You notice the skills, and I guess I knew, but didn't click, right? These skills are not tied to a particular, ability. Climbing is not tied to might or, dang it, agility. I was going to say dex. So, you get these skills, but you could try to argue they might apply to whatever they might apply to, depending on which test type you're going for. Now, side note, again, you get the +2, but it's not an edge. We'll come back to that, right? So you're getting +2 on the skill, which is kind of an edge, but it's not an edge. So you could get edge on a test and also get +2. So you could have edge +2. Yeah, let's put a pin in that. So we have that much. You don't get these +2 skill bonuses for creature and terrain reactive tests. So if creature is, I don't know, a dragon's going to breathe fire on you, and you have to make a test to avoid the fire. I'm just making it up. And you have, I'm looking for something. I'm looking at these things. Escape artist. That isn't a good one. But you get the idea. If you think you have a skill that's going to apply to the check against the monster, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get +2 against that for monsters and terrain effects. If you fail a test, you can't retry it, unless something changes that makes it meaningful that you should get another try. Maybe, there's a lock and you fail to pick the lock, and then, I don't know, someone gives you magical lock picks and they work better or something. You could give it maybe try again. You can try and convince your DM that it's worthy of another try because the conditions changed. Here you can see the different outcomes of the test. So test comes in 3 flavors: easy, medium, and hard. And as you can see here from what I snipped out of the book, right, you got to make your power roll. It goes down into 3 tiers and a natural 19 and 20. We'll get to that as well. Basically, if it's an easy test, you're going to basically always succeed. You might get a reward. You might get a consequence, right? As you go up a level to medium, if you get in tier 1, you will fail the test. And then you can see how it scales up from failure to success with consequence, to success with reward. When you go up to a hard test, it shifts again. You get failure with a consequence, failure, success with reward. Okay. So, so like success with a consequence might be, if you're trying to scale that wall, would be, yeah, you scaled the wall, but the guards saw you. And so forth. So just keep that in mind. If you watched any of the Daggerheart on Critical Role, you've seen similar. I haven't read Daggerheart yet. I don't know if I plan to buy it or not, but regardless, you see that mechanic. So what is an easy, medium, and test? That's the next thing. So that's what we're going to get here in a second. So just an FYI, NPCs don't normally take tests, except when they do, as you see in a minute. To me, maybe people overdo ability checks in 5e or other systems. To me, I kind of read this and I was kind of like, that's how I play it. But maybe different people do different things. I'm sure they do. So the NPCs don't normally make tests. However, they might. Like if some creature is trying to sneak up on you, right? Then they might roll some sort of test that checks to see if they sneak up. Because the DM doesn't necessarily tip the players on what's going on. So what is an easy, medium, or hard test? So when you look at this, right, I mean, again, it kind of tears up. An easy test is when you're doing a test against one creature or, what have you, and, excuse me, they have a lower bonus than you. So this is like an agility test and it's against one creature and they have a lower agility score than you do, then this would apply. For a moderate, if it's if you have one creature that has the same bonus as you, it's a medium. So, you both have a +2 for agility or something, and it's an agility test, it's a medium. Or if you're doing a test against multiple creatures and their score is lower as well, right? So that's a moderate. A hard is one creature with a higher bonus or multiple creatures with the same bonus. I couldn't find anywhere in the rules to say what happens if you're doing multiple creatures that have a higher bonus than you. So I'm guessing you fail. That's what just makes sense once you kind of go through this. I don't know what else you would do. So that's how you figure out your tests. Just some other stuff as well. So for opposed power rolls, so maybe you're arm wrestling someone, right? So you're both going to maybe do a see who spins the larger might roll. You would just do your spin. You would add your bonuses probably. Well, you would for might in this case, and then you would see who wins. If you got a tie, then you would tie, right? So in that case, if it was an arm wrestling, then I guess nobody wins. You just are just stuck in the middle or something. Reactive tests do exist. So again, this is kind of similar to what I was saying earlier. In this case, you're trying to, maybe a rock is falling on your head and you just tell the guy, spin a test, and you don't tell him the rock is falling. But however you not want to have a test go out without the DM giving context. So a critical hit in this situation is a little different. And again, I'm not sure when this would totally apply, but we'll go from there. So in combat, if you get a critical hit, you get another action, right? So keep that in mind. In a test, if you get a critical, then you auto succeed, right? And not just that, you would, going back here, right? You would auto succeed with a reward, right? So that's always the case if you crit on one of these tests. All right, math time. So let's just say you want to help someone do a test. Happens on the tide, right? So let's get to the right page because here we go, assist the test. So assisting the test is on page, what is this, 258, right? Yes, 258. So if you're following along at home. So when you assist with a test, right, you need to have a skill that's going to apply to helping someone else pass the test. You have to justify it to the DM, and then you roll, right? And you do a normal raw 2d10 roll and see what your result is on the 3 tiers. Now, just thinking out loud, and I haven't read all the character classes or their abilities or anything like that. Like off the cuff, I I if you're assisting and you're already justifying to the DM that you should be doing it, I'm assuming as part of the rules here, because it doesn't say that you could ever get a +2 on assisting on a test, you're just going to do a straight roll. Maybe some characters have an ability that would give you bonuses on this roll. I didn't try to look for them, but the bottom line is you just do it for right now. We'll just go vanilla and say you're doing a straight roll. If you roll a tier 1, you actually make things worse, right? You actually make things worse, and you give your friend who you're trying to help a bane on his spin. Okay. If you get a tier 2, then the other person will get an edge on the test. If you get a tier 3, you give the other person a double edge on the test. Now, this really bothered me, and I tried to stay away from doing math, but this just set up my spidey sense for a second. Well, it's like, well, wait a second, you know, wait a cotton picking minute, right? I'm gonna move my face somewhere else. Put up here. Boop. Wait a second. Like, you're the most likely to spin a tier 1, right? That's what we talked about in the other videos, right? So it's like, you are, if you help, you are most likely not going to help. And I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, that's got to be right, because like a tier 1, like we said, 11 or less, you would fail, and 11 is the top of the bell curve, right? So you have the whole thing of this one side of the bell curve and the top. So clearly it's over 50%. So can you actually help someone trying to assist them? That's when I pulled out the math, right? How does this work? And do you, right? So I'm not going to worry right now about consequences or rewards. I'm just looking at this with a straight, what happens if you just help someone and just worry about pass or fail. Okay, I'm moving my face so it cuts that off. Okay, there we go. All right, great. So let's try. Easy is easy, right? As you see down here, I've got my percentages from before. The only thing different here, and this is what gets into the critical thing as well, where I was asking a question, but this is minor. I presume something will come out in the wash. It says that you would always pass if you spun a crit, a raw 19 or 20 on the 2d10, right? Well, I mean, you get that anyway, right? For most things, for Bane, Raw, Edge, or Double Edge, you're already going to be okay, right? I mean, you'll get a reward in some cases instead of success, but we're not going to worry about that here. The only time that it would help you pass instead of fail if you actually had a double Bane, in which case I had to take 3%, which is what you need to spin a crit, here, and took it away from tier 2. So just FYI. But I don't even know how you get a double Bane on a test. So just keep that in mind. But let's get down further. So that's why these numbers here are a little different, but I don't even know how they apply. I'm sure there's creatures that maybe give you a Bane automatically when you get a test, so you could double Bane that way. Just a guess. All right, so if it's an easy test, you're going to pass, right? Doesn't matter how well you spin or how badly you spin, you're going to pass. You might get a reward, you might get a consequences, but you are passing. So there's no sense in helping on an easy test. Now, of course, the DM, director, whatever you want to call them, GM, they probably aren't going to tell you what you need to spin, right? So players have to use their Jedi, instincts or whatever to figure out whether you think it's going to be easy, medium, and hard. But no harm, no foul for the most part. You're going to pass. So, it is what it is. All right, so let's go for medium. So for a medium, you need a 16 or higher to get a success. Okay? So if you are just doing a raw spin with no help, you've got a 45% chance to basically pass the test, right? 35 plus 10 on the raw column, right? Doing a raw spin. Now, what if you help? Okay, so if you help, the first player, the helping player, is going to spin a straight roll. And depending on what he gets, then that's going to affect what the second person gets. And then you see what your percentages is from there. So, sorry to take you back into school, if you're not already still in school, but conditional probability. That's what we got here. This is a conditional probability. So the math of that is sitting right here, right? So you can see that I have a bunch of numbers. I'll explain what they mean, but no problem. So you have to say, okay, let's just assume that the person, the helper, spins a crappy spin. He gets a tier 1, so he's actually going to make the other player do worse. Okay, so player who's doing the test, if that happens, would only succeed 28% of the time, right? Because assuming I got these maths right, he's in the Bane category because the helper missed. So he's going to get a tier 1 or tier 3 is going to be 28%. Sure, no problem. However, the odds that event is ever going to happen is actually 55%, right? Because the helping player, had to spin. He spun in the 55 percentile so that he got the Bane, which made the other dude try and do his thing. So that's why over here, the way you do that mathematically is you say 0.55 plus times, slow down, Paul, 0.55 times 0.28, right? 55% chance of getting a 28% success. Rinse and repeat, right? So now let's assume that the helper spun a tier 2. Well, that's only going to happen 35% of the time. If it's 35%, that's here, 0.35. And then if he does that, he's in the edge category, and he's going to get a 0.64 to try and be successful. So that's the 0.35 times 0.64. If the person who's helping spins a raw tier 3, that only happens 10% of the time. But if he does, the dude or dudette is going to succeed because you can only spin tier 2 or tier 3, right? So with that being said, you add all those numbers together, you multiply the 3 possibilities, add those 3 possibilities together, you get 47.8. So like, if you help, your chance of helping someone succeeding is only a couple percentage points. It's not even a +1 in a D20 system. If I've got that right, and feel free to do it. I mean, like, just FYI, right? For those who are not math, enabled, I did this in a spreadsheet just so I could play with it, right? I mean, anyone who's taken statistics has done these things in their sleep, but just to figure it out, right? So for those at home, real fast, here's your possible rows, 2 through 20. That's what I rolled. How many outcomes do you have for that roll? So to spin a 2 on 2d10, the die 1 gets a 1, die 2 gets a 1, that's 2. There's only one possibility to get that on 2d10. If you want to spin a 3 on 2d10, there are two ways of doing it. Die 1 spins a 1, die 2 spins a 2, or die 2 spins a 2, and die 2 spins a 1, right? So there's two ways of doing that, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what column B is. If you add up all those numbers, there's actually, right, I add up to 100, right? So now all you got to do is say, all right, I just got to do math, right? There's one possible outcome, and there's 100, blah, 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 blah. So from there, you just got to start figuring out probabilities, right? So like, for example, for 55%, right? I'll just kind of do that for a second so you can see, right? I'm just simply summing up, right? You guys spend an 11 or less, right? So, okay, 11, this is 11 or less, that adds up to what that adds up to, and you divide it by 100, adds up to 55. And rinse and repeat. If you want to do this one, right, I need 12 through 16. Okie dokie, right? And divide that by 100. And then for this one, you got to do 17 through 20 and divide it by 100 again. You get it again. And you rinse and repeat. When you start doing the edge, you got to add 2 to the roll. So now that actually lowers it, right? So to get a tier 1 for a edge, right, you now have to spin 9 or less, because if you spun a 10, you would add 2 and it would become a 12, which would be the next one up. So for this one, you got to go from 2 to 9 and divide by 100, and so on and so on and so on. And then for the end numbers, I just simply like add it up, because I mean, edge here is going to be the same as raw here, because you're just taking tier 1 and shifting up. So I didn't bother to do the math. And then this one is going to be the sum of tier 2, tier 3. It ain't hard, right, to figure all that out, to make sure. And then, of course, for Bane, you're subtracting, which is like adding. So like for tier 1, for a Bane, right, instead of 11 and lower, it would be 13 and lower, because a 13 becomes an 11. And then, this guy here is going to be 14 to 18, right? Because the 18 will now become a 16 when you subtract 2. The 14 becomes a 12 when you subtract 2. So that works there. And then, of course, for tier 3, these are crits. They don't get shifted. So I guess that's one reason why you guys say it auto crits, right? Because otherwise these would become a 17 and 18. But a crit's a crit, so they stay where they are. So yeah, those are the numbers, right? And I don't see anything wrong with it. Same thing with hard. So you just rinse and repeat with hard. And so with hard now, you need a 17 or greater to do to help, right? The person who's doing the helping, they're still spinning a straight roll, right? They're still spinning the same 55, 35, 10 for their percentages. So those numbers are going to not change, right? To the 55, the 35, the 0.1, they're all going to change. Because they're all going to stay the same. You're just changing the percentages in the brackets, because now you just have to do tier 3 only. So if someone was spinning a Bane, that would be 3% times the 0.55 for the probability of getting the Bane. Same thing here. If you get an edge, that would be 0.21, only a 35% chance of getting that. And then for the double edge, it would be 0.45, 45%, only a 10% chance of getting that. You multiply that out, add them up. Again, you only are helping by a few percentage points if you help. Now, I mean, you could mentally justify that you are hopefully making it less likely that you are going to get rewards and remove consequences. And I didn't go that deep down the rabbit hole, but it still feels that doing a help on a test is a pretty minimal help. If someone sees anything wrong with this, please put it in there so I can like smack myself on top of the head on what I did wrong. But it looks right to me, and yeah, the help doesn't seem as helpful as I would think off the top. Again, maybe there's something with creatures and monsters that affect this in somehow, and it might somehow change the math or make it help more, but it is what it is. So let's circle around. We said earlier that if you have a skill that applies, you can get a +2, but not count it as an edge, which means you could theoretically get edges with a +2 bonus. Maybe that changes the math, because I'm like, all right, I gotta know now, whatever. So this looks very similar, but now I added 2 before it even started, right? So, for this one, it shifts everything over, right? Out of the gate, what was a raw here now becomes what you would get when you get a Bane, right? Because you're adding 2 to the roll. So if you think about, hey, I got a Bane, I get a plus, and I got a +2 to the roll, they cancel each other out. It's basically a straight roll, even though I got a Bane. Getting the raw roll is now doing an edge, in a sense, right? Because I didn't get the edge, but I got +2 anyway. It's like an edge. Getting an edge is like, I don't want to say double edge because that's something different, but you're getting +4 on that roll now instead of +2, and then the double edge is the double edge. So, okay, how does that change the math, right? Okay, so this is the statistics for all those different breakdowns. Okay. The straight roll, just to go back, right? The person who's helping is still following this column, right? What happened here? Go back. Back. Thank you. All right. It's still following the raw column here. The person is still going to follow these numbers who's doing the helping, which means in the equations I just showed, I'm going to go back to in a second, these numbers, the 55, 35, and 10%, they're not changing, right? Because that person's still doing a straight roll who's doing the helping. You're only, again, changing the numbers inside the brackets in the conditional probability. So going back to this, how does it help? Well, an easy is still easy, right? You're still going to pass. To get no help, you got a 64% chance of succeeding with no help, which makes sense because, you're just basically adding up those two numbers. Your raw spin is now like an edge, and these numbers will match the numbers here on the edge. All good. So 43 plus 21 is 64. Great. Here's what bothered me. If you help on a medium test, the numbers go down. I'm going to pull up my calculator and double check it, but the numbers seem to go down, right? So it gets a little funky, right? You're adding +2. Okay. So what's happening here? You've got go back. Oh, I'm just checking to make sure this works, man, because it's driving me insane. Okay. If the person helping spins a bane, you got a 55% chance of doing that. And your chance of success for a bane is 35 plus 10, right? Because your bane is now a straight roll. You got plus 2, you got a bane, they cancel out. It's a raw roll, 45%. 55 times 45%. No problem. For medium, right? For medium, you have a 35% chance of getting the tier 2, right? And now that would be an edge, and you go up to 79%. You're going 43 plus 36. This is cool. This is something, and this might be where it gets a little tripped up in a 2D10 world, right? But you can see this raw is now a plus 2. This edge is now a plus 4. You notice the chance of getting a tier 2 roll does not change, even though you got an extra 2 bonus. You're just swapping the edge and the raw numbers, right? You had a 36% chance of getting a tier 1 with raw. You get an edge in this case, it goes up to 30, it goes down to 21. And for tier 3, it goes from 21 to 36. They just swap. Well, why is that? This is life with a bell curve. So my edge numbers are down here. So if you take a look at 43, so this would be, boop. So this would be, I'm adding 2 to the roll, right? A tier 2 roll. It's a 2d10 plus 2, and you got into tier 2. So you don't need 12 to 16 in this case. You need 10 to 14, right? Right. Okay. So, yeah, there's your numbers. You can see it covers 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Well, what happens if I add another 2? If I add another 2 to a roll, then what does that mean? That means 8 and 9, a spin of an 8 or a 9, will become a tier 2 roll, and a spin of 13 and 14 is going to become a tier 3 roll. Right? Right. So if I did that, that means that the 7 and 8 are going to go away because they're going to tier 3, but I'm going to pick up a 7 or 8 from the tier 1 because it's a bell curve, right? So here, boop, you can see 9, 10, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7. But for this, it's going to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 9. So you're just swapping the 8 7s from one tier to another. And that's why the edge with a plus 2, making it a plus 4 roll, doesn't change the tier 2 percentage chance. You're just swapping tier 1 to tier 3 outcomes, percentage-wise. So because of that, the 43 is better. You getting a 36 and a 21, okay, they swapped. So you're a little better that way. But, so, okay, great. For the double edge, it's still 1, right? It doesn't matter whether you get a reward or not, but you're still 100%, and you got a 10% chance of doing that. You do that, get out your iPhone, or whatever your calculator of choice is. Dear me, right? That's to make sure I'm not insane. 0.55 times 0.45 plus 0.35 times 0.79 plus 0.1 times 1 equals 62.4. So you actually make it worse. I mean, it's 2.4%, but it just like feels like your brain explodes a little bit there, that you helping on a medium spin where the person gets a +2 from a skill actually is a few percentage points lower. And I really think it's just because of the edge percentage does not increase. You don't get enough of a bump with just swapping it to get a percentage out of it. Really, with none of these, you really do. And then you have the hard, right? So the hard would be you need a 21 with no help on a +2 because you have your skill. So there's your 21%. If you do it the other way, right, then again you would have zero point 0.1 success if you had the Bane. You would have a 36% chance if you had the Edge with the +2, and the 64%, and that comes out to 24.5, which is slightly better. So this bothered me to no end, just in principle, to have one number go down. I swear I've looked at this 5 different ways. I give up. It seems right to me. In the end, you just got to know that if you're helping on a test, you are minimally helping the success. And at best, you are lowering your chances of getting a consequence and hopefully, I guess, getting a reward. But I mean, I didn't dive into that math, but the fact that you're only affecting things by a couple percentage points, like, I have a hard time believing that you're making that much impact on the consequence versus reward. But maybe I'll do that math someday. Yeah. Okay. All right, hide and sneaking. So everyone wants to hide because you got to hide in whenever you're doing things. So you must have cover or concealment in order to be hiding. The creature who you're trying to hide from can't see you trying to hide. So you must have some way of obscuring, or whatever word you want to use, before you try your hide. The hide remover during combat, assuming the above are true, is automatic. Funky, but that's the deal. This is on page 258, second paragraph under hiding. When you use the hide maneuver to hide during combat, while you have cover or concealment and the creature isn't observing you, you automatically hidden from them unless the director deems otherwise. If you hide outside of combat, the director, DM, might require a test to see whatever. If you're hiding, you can't be targeted unless someone's throwing a fireball or something similar at you. It's got to be an area effect. Ability rolls are made with edge if done before end of turn unhiding. So like if I'm hiding here and the person I want to do whatever damage I want to do is 15 feet away, if I run out of my cover, run the 15 feet, and then smack them, I still get my ability roll or whatever with an edge, because it was the same turn that I became unhidden, that I still have whatever advantage that I might get. If you're searching for creatures, you can search for all creatures within a 10 square within your character, which is pretty big. There is an opposed roll of agility using hide versus intuition. Man, don't have hot sauce before you do videos. And the DM could, of course, change that as they wish. You can use your maneuver action to point out a creature who is not hidden to you. So if this creature is not hidden, but he's hidden to my buddy, I can say, there he is, and point, but that is my maneuver bonus action. If you're sneaking, you must be hidden, and you can't be in combat. You can't sneak in combat. You move at half speed, and you're using an agility test. So the last couple things here to try and get this done under an hour, you have group tests and a montage test. So the group tests are kind of similar to what you've seen in any other group test system. You know, all the heroes who are part of the test have to spin, and then if you're a hero in that test, you can't also assist and be part of the test, right? As long as half of the people who are doing the test succeed, then you're good. Same thing for getting rewards and consequences. If at least half the team spun rewards or half the team spun consequences, then you get the one or another. So the last part is the montage test. So I will give this through this briefly, but I would definitely recommend that you read this because they dedicated, let's see, 1, 2, 3 basically full pages, a little over a page of which is an example of a montage test. So this is definitely different than what you would see in 5e. This is something that I have seen done in Daggerheart watching Critical Role. So yeah, good to read this just to make sure you've got your mind wrapped around it when this happens to you as a player or as a DM, of course, creating one. So I'm looking at this from a player point of view. I'm not going to try and go through almost 2 pages of stuff about, you know, all the idiosyncrasies of this that a DM has to think through. But basically, it's a test where you have more than one turn, right? Usually 2 turns. However, I have seen Matt Mercer and other ones in Daggerheart have this go across definitely more than 2 rounds, as I recall. So what happens is, in the test, you have a certain goal or whatever that you're trying to do, right? I really liked the idea of, like, saying you're trying to navigate across the desert or something like that, you know, or you're trying. I've seen Matt in Age of Umbra do something similar where they're trying to outrun creatures, slightly different take or other tests, but the idea it's more than one round, and on each turn, each hero gets a chance to test or assist to try and do whatever the event might be, right? So if I look at the book here, right? So the sample one they do here is 4 heroes must cross the vast, inhospitable, infinite desert to warn a city that there's a evil empress is coming to kick their butt. And if the characters can arrive in time, they can organize the defense of the city, giving the people a greater chance of winning. And it goes through the montage from there, right? Trying to get across this desert in time. So each time you do a round, each hero gets a chance to either assist in the test or be part of it. A hero can use an item, ability, or whatever option to help. If the DM agrees that it makes sense, then +2 will be added to your roll. If a hero is testing or assisting that round, then they can't do so again until the next round, right? You are allowed to say, I'm not participating, It just means that you're going to go on to the next round, and maybe only some of your group will be part of that test, which may or may not be a problem. But if you think that you are so sucky at what's being spun and it's better for you to pass instead of like screwing up your group, you can do that. A hero cannot use the same skill twice. So in the first round of the test, if you use agility, when you get to the second round, you can't use agility again. You got to use something else. Well, I guess it's same skill, excuse me, not the necessary thing. So like if you used, you know, the sneak skill in the first part, you can't use the sneak skill again the next time. The test will have a success fail limit. So basically, depending on the difficulty of the test, and I'm not going to get into how to make an easy, medium, or hard test. We'll leave that part for the DM. But basically, like you can see here, if it's an easy test, then to get a successful outcome, you have to get 5 successes. For a failure, you have to get 5 misses, or you have to run out of time, right? Obviously, you can adjust these depending on how many rounds your test is going to be, because I assume these are assuming that you're only going to do 2 rounds. But if you want to do a 3-round or a 4-round, then you should probably scale these up accordingly. If it's a moderate or a hard, then you just have to get more successes than failures, depending on what level you are going to do it at, yada, yada. So there's a whole thing about total success, partial success, total failure. I'm just going to say, because we're almost up to an hour, right? We're at 51 minutes. This is more than enough. But yeah, so that's going through test. Definitely reread Mantra on your own to make sure you've wrapped your head around it. And I'm not going to lie, this whole assist thing is just weird to me. But dang if I can find something wrong with it. Like, the percentages here add up to 100, which makes me think that I didn't really do anything wrong math-wise there. If I had done something wrong when I shifted the numbers, odds are it wouldn't be adding up to 100% on each column. It feels right, but it feels like helping almost isn't worth the help. But maybe I'll dive into it a little bit deeper and just see how well it avoids consequences and gets you rewards, because that to me is really the only thing at this point that can justify helping, unless you just want to make sure that you're getting that extra 2% to pass your test. But yeah, that's it. So hopefully this is helpful. Looking forward to reading what people see in the comments, and talk to you soon. Bye.